back in my basement. Anakin Starkiller is with us again. And well, Dan, why don't you take the reins on this and you start it off?
Okay. So I don't know how long we've been working on this.
Over a year.
For well over a year. Yeah, about a year ago, I had run out of builders kits on my website at Star's End, and Danny contacted me and asked me if I can do any more. And I told him I didn't really have any plans to do builders kits or to do any more V2 work unless like new references came to light. And then some new references came to light. So, which I can't really talk about, but like it allowed me to sort of revisit a couple, proportionally, I found that like all the work that Roy and I and everybody else had done back in 2018 still held out. But there were a couple details that I noticed that I was finally convinced of in some of the newer references that turned up for me. And I started talking with you, Danny, which you obviously know, but we're telling other people about like when you build these things, since you now have more in-depth knowledge of the V2 than I think anybody out there besides Brandon, that like, you notice a lot of details that like I hadn't seen in 2018 and that other people maybe miss when they do some of the work on theirs. And I know that, you've built at this point, my version, you've built like 3 of my versions. You built the Solos holds, you've built Romans, you've built probably an RPK customs and, God knows what else at this point. And I know with like the Solos hold, you've remachined the grips any number of times and you've done a couple modifications to my builder's kits. And so we started having a conversation about like, what would be your ideal V2?
My vision.
Your vision, and like what changes would you make if you had your druthers? And that put us back into the CAD, and we made a couple changes and a couple tweaks and came up with a design that I'm excited by, and I think you're excited by.
Realistically, there wasn't much to change.
Mm-hmm.
It's just little things here and there that I add on to the builder's kits that I wanted to incorporate in this revised version. So the prototype is here. And the funny thing about the prototype for those watching at home is Starkiller sent it to me. It went from New Jersey to Providence, all the way to LA, got lost. And then
Big Easy. And I think it also had a stop in New Orleans. And yeah, we've been anxiously tracking it. We've been anxiously tracking it over the week, being like, where the hell is this thing going to show up next?
Actually, my hands are actually shaking. Wow. Okay. Wow, it's heavy, huh?
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, it's funny how adjusting for, a few millimeters on the inside, has an overall cumulative effect of a different experience when you pick it up in your hand.
Wow. What a difference. Holy crap, man. That is perfect. That seam line's perfect, Dan. Wow. And what else we got in here?
I think I have a clamp, a pommel.
This is my first time actually seeing the physical thing in my hands. I've seen the CAD model. Oh my God, it's perfect.
You've seen the hell out of the CAD model.
Yeah, yeah. But
we've been back and forth working on the CAD model for at least 6 months, if not longer.
Oh wow! All right, let me see the pommel. Ooh, the milling circles, nice, like you were saying. All right, so I have. Holy smokes, man! You're a freaking artist, man. Wow. My problem is I can't focus. My eyes are jumping all over the place. Holy smoke. So I have the builder's kit here.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, man. Totally outdone yourself.
The nipple on that is going to be the same as the builder's kit, although, well, it's almost the same. It's the same from the outside. It's the same from the outside, but this part right here, Danny, is a little bit shorter
Okay,
than on the old builder's kit, like maybe a couple millimeters here. And then this recessed hole is just a little bit deeper.
okay,
Right, so it gives you a little bit more room for this if you want to do electronics,
yep.
right? To make sure that you don't run out of space.
I noticed that right away that this was
Mhm.
deeper, and I was going to say that's better for the blade.
Yeah, and it allows the blade to recess, you know, an extra quarter of an inch maybe.
And same thread pitch, right?
Same thread pitch, although it feels better to me.
All right, wow. The ring section, like you've shown me the pictures, you know, your cell phone pictures, but holy cow, man, this is,
Yeah, they really did it. They really did a bang out job of copying all the wonkiness. And I mean, if you look at it, you'll see like they have curves where they're supposed to be curves.
yep.
You know, that there's like a proper sort of asymmetrical angles on the grips that are supposed to be asymmetrical.
I am so excited.
It's kind of a balance between maybe my builders, like for people who are referencing it against some of the other replicas, it's almost like a bit of a balance between my old builder's kit and like the Solos Hood, in that it doesn't have the flat mill or the flat recesses that were more characteristic, but a couple of them have like a sort of curve to it, or like a, you know, like a rounded slope on the inside.
Everyone is different.
Yeah, every single one is different. Yeah.
Yep, every single valley is different.
Mhm.
And it took a lot of work. I mean, you've done this. How many revisions have you done this?
I mean, we must have gone back and forth like 20 different times on a little bit here and a little bit there.
Incredible, man. I'm so excited for this.
So another big change is just in terms of construction, right? Pommel comes off the same. So the differences on the pommel are the milling mark. Well, first of all, like there's a bit more pronounced mill marks in between the pommel cubes, which lines up with what Brandon always said, that covered in milling marks, right? Scott said the same
It's
thing.
great.
And then the mill circle here,
Yeah.
instead of just being one single plunge with the sorry, I'm forgetting the part of the milling machine that cuts it.
End bit? End mill?
End mill, yeah. Instead of being a single plunge with the end mill, right? It has this sort of tombstone shape, and then it sort of stays in the center to give you like the circle. But then if you also look at it, you'll see that there's a slight more recessed leading up to the circle.
It's perfect.
Which I think is a little bit more indicative of what we're seeing in some of the reference pictures.
Yes. Yeah.
And it also like makes the mill recess a little less pronounced when it's situated in that tombstone, so that like it's still there and you see it, but like it's much more pronounced depending upon different angles. If you look at it straight on, you can barely see it.
That's
and
right.
If you catch it on an angle, it like pops out to you.
Yeah, that's cool, man.
And then another small change that I made for it too is I put a recessed pilot hole in the center of the inside of the pommel, so that if you decide you want to drill a hole into the pommel to vent sound directly through the bottom, you can just line up a drill bit right through it and then push through 3 millimeters worth of aluminum, and you'll have a nice centered hole that looks, you know, nice and neat, rather than having to try to drill it from the outside and worry about like your drill bit wandering.
This thing is a beast, though.
It does comparatively feel heavier. So the big difference on the body, right, is whereas the old builder's kit was very wide all the way around, and some people said like it actually didn't. When I originally designed the builder's kit, I wanted to have as much space on the inside as possible, because first of all, I'm not an electronics guy, so I just wanted to keep all options open. And then secondly, like a lot of the technologies that are going into Sabres today were not as readily available in 2018, and all the chassis options we have today, we didn't have then. But since there's been developments and there's a lot more chassis available that are 1 inch around, we narrowed the inside of the body, right? So it's wide here to accommodate the pommel, but then it moves into a 1-inch recess to still give you enough space for the chassis, but also to increase like the overall weight of the Saber. And then the other big change is on the builder's kits, there was a J-locking thing to allow you to do sort of twist reveals. But what I found was that people weren't really using that system as much. What you were doing, Danny, I know all your builds was just set screw, putting a set screw in to hold them together so that they were nice and solid. So what we ended up deciding to do here was to just do an internal threading like I have on my Hero, and also on which is on also the MOM Hero.
Man.
And it's the same threading and the same sort of depth, so that any chassis that you got for my Hero or the MOM Hero should also fit this V2.
Incredible. And another thing too is like with the Hero, when you hold that, it's a totally dual worthy hilt, just like this now. You don't have to worry about the flexing inside, the J-lock. You don't have to worry about that. Totally dual worthy.
And then we also there's these holes here, which if you used a chassis that had sides, you could use them for sound venting. But the reason why we put them there actually is because they're on the original prop.
That's right.
And this is material that Danny told me about, and that other sources have confirmed. And so we wanted to make sure we were trying to match everything as much as possible.
There's
so,
4 holes that hold the motor in there.
Right.
And they use these holes to tweak and align the motor inside the hilt. And that was very important. I was like, if we're going to do this Starkiller, I need these holes. I need to clamp. So
very, very particular. The knob is the same as on the builder's kit, and you were very particular about saying don't change a goddamn thing about it, because all the vintage knobs that you've worked with like match up perfectly to it.
The Starkiller cone knob is the most accurate cone knob we have available. You've seen the pictures I have of the Starkiller cone knob screwed into a vintage vintage cone knob, and you can't tell them apart. You can't. So when you were talking about changing, like, don't change the cone knob.
Yeah, which was a little bit, I worked with a different shop this time, so I couldn't just have them run the same CNC programming. I actually thought about like going back to the old shop to try to get the knobs, but the new place was able to match it. And I could not tell the difference between my old knobs and the new ones. Yeah.
It's crazy. I never actually got to thank you. And I just really appreciate you, Dan, letting me get on board on this and having so much creative control that you've given me over this project. I mean, it has everything I've wanted forever. Everything is in this hilt. So it's a big piece of me involved in this, and I couldn't have done it without you. And I just really appreciate you having the faith in me to let me do this. I
appreciate all the help you gave. It made it worth going back into it, one more time, that we were working together on it, and it was a lot of fun. It made it a fun project rather than just a repeat of what I'd done before.
I don't know. I could be a pain in the ass because I'm like, sorry, just tweak a little bit more here.
Yeah, there were a couple. I mean, there are a couple like small details, like, okay, so I just threw a clamp on it, but things like this part right here, right on my older replica, it was completely flat. I think on all the other ones up to date, it's completely flat. And Danny was like, actually, there's a pitch. It's a really small pitch, and it like is almost at that point where my concern was that I just wouldn't be able to specify it to the machinist, because a lot of times you program something in CAD, and when a machinist sees like, oh, is it 90? It's not 90 degrees. It's 89.5 degrees. He goes, all right, it's 90 degrees. I'm not going to program in half a degree off, for simplifying the design. So that was my biggest concern. When I did my first run of V2s, they took all these ridges and they just made them even, because looking at it from their perspective, they didn't see much of a difference. They thought I was just a sloppy CAD designer that like, can't make things even and straight. Whereas I'm trying to convey like a really specific geometry to them. That was hard for them to convey. And I was worried that the same thing would happen, especially since we had complicated the design so much. right? That it wouldn't be sort of easily translatable to like the programming that has to go into CNC machine. But luckily, all my fears were unfounded, as they seem to have matched everything from the design we wanted.
I can't believe it. I can't, because I mean, some of these differences in the rings, I mean, you're down to 0.04 or 0.03. I mean, you can't even tell by eye, and it's all in spec. It's unbelievable.
I mean, it's one of those things that like you can tell when you blow it up on like a CAD system, and you're seeing the rings like this big across, right? But when you look at it in your eye, you almost can't tell the difference. And a lot of times, like that stuff just gets lost in the programming of a machinist.
Another thing that came out perfect is the seam here.
Yeah.
So I was very adamant about the seam because Chris, actually his name T Cruz on the RPF, was the one who discovered that seam. And this seam here proves that the V2 came from one of the aluminum bucks, that it came from the same mold as all the other stunts, because there was long speculation that the V2 was 100% machined by itself. That casting line proves it right there for me. So
yeah, and there's little things like there's also now there's a recess right here. There's like a little bit of a seam between the clamp section and the booster section, right? Which starts out on the wood book, goes on to like the metal castings, then is there on the V3 castings, right? And then gets copied onto the V2 casting, right? Little details like, the seam there that came from, I don't know if you've been following on the RPF, right? The recent sort of experiments that Brian's been doing.
Oh, he's a wizard with this.
He's got this like, 50-year-old wooden replicating machine that was meant to copy like lathe patterns, right? So you stick a object in, and then the lathe basically traces the outline of the cylinder and then reproduces it on a wood buck. That's now what Brian theorizes is how they actually made the wood buck that got turned into the V3, that got turned into the V2, and all the other stunts, right? Is that they actually just took, Alec Guinness's Hero Saber that was made out of, the Derwent and the Hales grenade and the booster, and just sort of stuck it in the machine and told the machine to copy it, right? Because when Brian has done that with his MK1, he's found a lot of weirdly similar artifacts that show up in Gus Lopez's wood buck.
I totally stand behind this theory. It's just crazy.
It does make a lot of sense.
Just luck that his shop got one of those and boom, he banged them out. It's like, holy cow, man. Crazy.
Yeah. I was messaging him the night when he first started sort of experimenting with it, and it was hard. And he asked me if I had any access to one of these machines, because I've worked in different machine shops, and I said I know about them as something that existed like years ago, but I don't know any like contemporary machine. He's like, well, I got this really old one from like 40 years ago, which is also, when Star Wars was, right? And he's like, and I've been playing around with my MK1, scratched the hell out of my pommel, unfortunately, but produced some really interesting results.
I'm going to donate a pommel to him just so he can whip out some more wood bucks for us.
Yeah, I think I actually might be doing that too.
It was unbelievable. Yeah. I cannot believe the shop did exactly what we wanted. I cannot believe it. I was thinking to myself, well, they're probably going to get close, because who's going to do every little detail? I mean, it's exact. It's exact. I'm so excited. So before we wrap up, maybe we could tell the audience when to expect these, maybe, or something.
So I'm planning on placing so after Danny and I go over it and make sure that everything is kosher, I'm planning on placing an order for 100 of them, and putting together kits for people that will be available on my website. And also Danny's going to be picking up an order of them for himself out of that 100 that will be turned into commission pieces. So you'll have to figure that out with him. And then we're hoping also to include clamps and levers. And I also was lucky enough to pick up a few sets of vintage boots, of vintage waders. So we have some mystery chunks to go with them, and we're going to put them all together as a package that will be for sale in the next couple of months. It's going to be dependent on how fast the machine shops come through, and then shipping, which is actually a goddamn nightmare right now.
Nightmare right now. It's absolute nightmare. So within a month or two, you'll see these on the website then. Yeah. Well, Starkiller, I can't thank you enough, man. This, seriously, this means so much to me that you brought this. You made me a part of this and brought it to the market.
I'm very, very excited to collaborate with you. I think
it's a dream. This is actually a dream of mine. It's a dream of mine because I finally got exactly what I wanted. What I see, I finally got. So I can't thank you enough for letting this be a possibility.
And also, a lot of work went into this too behind the scenes in the original development, and like we wouldn't have anything close to the proportions if it wasn't for Roy, because he was such a big help with the initial drafting and a lot of the details that we're talking about seeing like particular geometry around, like here, people on the RPF, Brian Scott, Loam, like T Cruz, a lot of people's ideas went into this too. Oh, and Anthony too, Tony Lage, who collaborated with me on the Princess Leia. He helped with some of the CAD work too, because he's a whiz with that.
Can't thank you enough, brother. Appreciate it. With that said, guys, keep an eye out on the forum. Keep an eye out at starsend.com, and we'll see you in the future. This is Halliwax and Starkiller out.